All right. So Supply Chain Unfiltered, Skill Soup's first podcast. Thanks, Chris, Phil, Rob, for coming in.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Pleasure. So we've got a perfect storm, I think, of obviously economic conditions, rising interest rates, fuel crisis, inflation. And then we've got AI sort of really grabbing hold of the total business cycle, but especially for procurement, I get a lot of conversations about AI. So I think let's just crack in. What is AI?
I often have this conversation with executive teams and I'll say, what do we mean by AI? And I get blank looks. Sometimes the CTO will carry on and more blank looks. And so I break it down to three really simple technologies, which is automation or robotic process automation, which is basically like a super macro that can operate across systems. Machine learning, where you get large sets of data. So, for example, great at spend classification. What is this level of spend? Or finding what are the things that we should be looking at because they're a bit scary. And then large language models with ChatGPT, Claude, all these things.
And large language models, Rob, is what I guess people familiar with AI are predominantly using at home, give or take. If I write a report and I go to AI, can you just make sure I'm not stupid and read that through or do my spell check?
That's what most people would think of as AI today, because that's what's really unlocked the hype, so to speak. But really AI is just probability. What is the next best word I should use given the context?
Okay.
But given there is so much admin in corporate Australia, especially in procurement, where we're always struggling to do the exciting bit, I think all three technologies have great application, and strung together, you can create agents, which is a buzzword. But there's a lot of hype. It's going to take a while to get real value because the theory's good, but what are we doing on the ground?
Okay. Well, that would lead me in then to, can we just then break down you've all been CPOs. What is a typical procurement framework that most of the audience would understand? So what's its component parts? And then it'd be great if we can then go into where AI can step in and increase productivity, create value. And what will it look like over probably the next 3 years, really? Because I imagine it's going to be pretty rapid how this gets taken up.
Go, Chris. You want me to go?
Okay, look, happy to. I mean, look, there's different components, as you know, and it can be sort of sourcing, supply management, category management. You know, you can talk to any firm or look anything up, and there's usually 7 boxes in most of them. For me, with what AI is, as Rob said, it's this amazing technology, but it's an accelerator. And it gives you access to information far faster and far greater. And for me, the sort of skill really in procurement is going to be what you do with it. There's a huge amount of focus right now on getting it in place, and people, and it's almost like a badge of honor. I've put in an agent, or I've done this LinkedIn training, or whatever it is. But it's like, what is the outcome I've driven from it? And I think it's going to be a really interesting one to look at. How much of it is productivity? So I get more time in my day through driving a better outcome. What am I doing now? I've got more time in my day. What am I using that time to go and get something of value?
Brilliant. And Phil, in your experience, how is it to date implemented? So you've been a CPO, you've been in Woolworths, one of the biggest procurement departments.
Yep.
Did they take it up? Did they try it? How did it deploy?
I mean, Woolworths is a bit unique. And I think, Rob, we've talked about this before, where organizations have difficulty in implementing AI in its basic form, just simply because of fear, data security, and other things. Woolworths is quite advanced. We were what we'd call a Google house. So we had a relationship with Google, and we used Gmail and other applications within the organization. And so Google being quite forward in their adoption and then deployment, we had Gemini as a private tenant. So my experience at Woolworths, we were early adopters to be able to use large language models in our day-to-day activities. There was no concern about, where I'm interacting with other corporates today, and the first question gets asked is, is my data safe? And I'm thinking, wow, we moved beyond that a year ago, but that's still very relevant for a lot of organizations today. And so Woolworths was, a very data-driven retailer, and so therefore there was a lot of early activity in the adoption of what we, LLM and other things. But now, more recently, in my interactions with different organizations, and I'm on the advisory board with Spend Console, and they're very deep in the payables orchestration and AI. the reality of implementing AI in certain aspects of the P2P flow, there's real productivity gains. It's not theoretical. It's not, hey, can I do more with my time? You know, when you go from processing 8,000 invoices per FTE to 46,000 invoices per FTE, when you go from having to contact a supplier to say you didn't reference a PO on that invoice to having AI do that for you on your behalf, those are real productivity gains. And so, you know, the theory is moving to reality for everybody now. Still, a lot of organizations are struggling, Rob, you might be able to share, with the actual making adoption available. You know, it's still, I still sit amongst CPOs in forums and I talk about, you know, my interaction with Claude, ChatGPT, and other, what we would call basic sort of engagements with AI. And they look at me like I'm speaking a foreign language.
And why is that, do you think?
It's just that, does anyone, do you want to tackle that one, Rob?
You go for it. You're on a roll.
just jump in if he starts to stall.
Yeah. I just think that there is still this, I think there's protectionism. So I think that's going on within CIOs and within their IT functions. Right. The arms are crossed. Prove it to me that we should be going down this path. I'm not sure about data integrity and IP and other things.
Can I quickly ask, sorry to interject, but is the CIO still the dominant force then for tech across the business? Or is it, I kind of felt it would be more fragmented these days, where tech would be part of doing business. So a head of marketing, a head of procurement would have almost a tech budget themselves to say, well, no, we're doing this. Or is that not the case?
I think you're in dangerous territory if you think this is a tech initiative.
Right.
So we did a case study and a webinar on the Brazilian banking industry. And what was fascinating about the Brazilian banking industry is 10 years ago, it looked exactly like the Australian banking industry. 4 big players dominated for nearly 100 years. Now, the single biggest player in the market is a digital disruptor. And the third biggest player is a digital disruptor.
Right.
And we did a case study on how did the CBA equivalent respond in this environment of disruption. And there is a parallel to Australia, because if you look at the superannuation adoption of AI in Australia, the big players are picking and choosing swim lanes. So one player is saying, oh, it's all about security for us. Another is saying we're using it for research. Another is saying we're about customer experience. But what the Brazilian bank was forced to do is say, this is a core capability. We're going to apply it wherever we find value. And the head of that transformation program said, if we weren't disrupted, we would still be going with individual swim lanes, as opposed to a central capability that the whole organization can use.
So it shouldn't be labeled as tech. It should be labeled as core capability.
Yeah, I do like that differentiation of core capability. But I mean, for me, there's a couple of things that underpin having AI. One is having the data, and you touched on it, you know, where you come from being a data-rich organization. Many organizations have a huge amount of data, but it's all over the place. And I do think there is a role in every procurement function to actually take responsibility for the data and putting it into at least a location or something where smart tools can go and interrogate. So I think there's, you know, that is one piece. And then the second one is, again, what is the problem that you're trying to solve for? Because you can spend a huge amount of time as a CPO or the most junior procurement person being very busy. But this really comes down to why are you in procurement and what is the role of procurement in your organization? And I think you've actually got to start with what problem you're trying to solve for before throwing AI, because it's hugely exciting, but you can spend a huge amount of time going down rabbit holes.
And I think that's a great point, your opening question of what is procurement today. And I always start with, there's basically 3 layers of a pyramid. The bottom layer is we just keep the wheels on. The contracts are in place. We're not at risk. We're doing the basics. You know, everything's working. If we're not doing that, we've got chaos. And hero-based cultures, we've all seen poor procurement functions that have heroes running around just trying to keep the wheels on. The next layer of the pyramid is engagement with the business. And if you don't have the bottom layer of the pyramid, engagement will vanish, shadow procurement, they won't trust you, they'll go and do it themselves. And only when you have alignment with the business and you're doing the basics well, can you talk about strategic procurement. So when anyone says, I want to be a strategic procurement function, I go, well, what does the base of the pyramid look like? And AI can help in all those areas. So one of my things if you're a procurement person out there, I bang my head against why there's not enough should cost modelling. Yeah. Do you understand the fundamental economic drivers of the stuff you buy year after year? Are you across it? FMCG companies, I did work for Nestle years ago, they would monitor the price of oil in real time because that was the single biggest driver of profit, because that was the single biggest cost of chocolate bar wrappers.
Right.
And they would increase or decrease production on an hourly basis based on what their oil purchasing prices were. So you just imagine that level of sophistication of end-to-end data. AI can rapidly create spend cubes and should cost modeling data for industries and trackers if you know how to use it well. So you can rapidly evolve to a more strategic function than previously I would have had to go and ask for budget, ask for headcount. Now I just need to know how to use the tools.
And I think that's a great point because, when we talk about it as CPOs and leaders of the function, we say to our team, when AI comes in, we'll use your time for other things, more strategic things, but no one ever answers the what. And so I think that's a great point, Rob, that's a classic example where should cost modeling and indices relating to that should cost modeling by categories is really what it should be a fundamental of procurement, but we never get to it. And so, that's where we start taking what would have been on the tools type work and this becoming more strategic in the way that we operate. And I think that, the old days of let me just have a savings target and deliver that for the CFO definitely moved away when we saw inflation coming into the picture. So very similar for me at Woolworths, we actually would predict into the annual operating plan not only what we anticipated to be productivity through the spend base, but also where we saw inflation coming in. And the only way to do that was to understand should cost modeling and indices and impact. So we could therefore inform the finance function next year for these costs associated with running a business. Don't just put arbitrary 4%.
Finger in the air, 10%.
Yeah, don't just put your finger in the air and guess. We'll tell you how much labor, fuel, what are the components that are relative to that cost, and then what the impact will be based on that. That's logical.
And get better informed on a monthly basis based on what's happening on the industries of the supply base.
So then our problem became, and procurement people will relate to this a lot, we then, finance gave up on procurement and giving them this information. They just said, you guys, you're not at that skill level. Then when we got to that skill level, we started reverting back to them saying, here's what you need to know for your next planning cycle. And finance didn't know what to do. Oh, no. We just raise it by the CPI increase. What do you mean?
We do that once a year.
You're confusing us because we have simplicity. And we're like, well, no. The more intellect and capability we put in this space, you should demand this of us, and we should be able to provide that to you. And I'd say that's one of the many things that a procurement function could do better going forward.
So is the tail wagging the dog with finance and procurement to some degree? Maybe procurement should be going upstream to finance, and I use the term upstream. I think procurement is an extension of finance, really, if it's done well, I think. I remember you saying many years ago, Rob, finance is the language of business. I've repeated it many times, actually, because you were spot on. But I think
this is a fundamental issue where procurement functions always say to me, we need a mandate. Well, what have you done to earn that mandate?
Yeah.
Right. So, I would give my procurement team sales training. I would say, I want you spending time. I once hired a former advertising executive to be my marketing business partner. I said, we can teach you procurement, but I want you having beers on a Friday night with the marketing people because I don't want to talk to procurement people. And so that's kind of that level of engagement. But where AI gets really exciting for me, bit of a red herring but relevant, is my wife she takes longitudinal blood tests and she runs them through on AI. She goes and sits with her GP and says, I noticed this has risen by this. I understand this is a likely result. And the GP sitting there floundering going, how did you pick that up? And I'm like, well, AI is good at spotting patterns.
Yeah.
I put the data in. And I think the finance data can now ingest. So I would always say to my business partner, like people I want to engage, what's the monthly report we give to each of the C-suite execs in their area of how spend is tracking and how is that different?
Yeah.
And if suddenly telco jumps by 20%, can we explain it? Is there something wrong? Do they expect it? Now, using AI to spot those patterns and have those insights, we can have a much richer conversation. So I'd spend the time training the model to test and drive the insights rather than spending ages poring over data.
So let's then go back to, you're a corporation, you've got I would say, an unproductive in your own scope or inefficient procurement team. You're struggling with upstream expectation. You feel like the baby's going to get thrown out with the bathwater, so to speak. They're going to get rid of procurement again in its 5-year cycle of investment, run it, throw it out the window. Business tries to run on a smelly, oily rag for a couple of years, then they bring it back in.
Net value builds up, they bring procurement in, they
and
would
when
take
I
the
used to
value
run
out.
Jigsaw, it would be a cycle, and you go, right, here we go, we're back on the journey. So
been around a while, Richard.
Yes.
I know. Sad. 5 of them.
Yeah, look, I think many listeners will feel sort of in that position. Many organizations have probably sort of slightly unsophisticated procurement teams, and not because of the individuals within it, but just because they sort of don't necessarily know exactly where they sit, or there's been a change of C-suite or CFO and different requirements. I think we sort of talked about it a little bit earlier. It is literally, what is the role of procurement? Well, what is its purpose in that organization? And is it, a for-profit organization? So it's about protecting the P&L. It's about protecting the balance sheet. Is it about protecting the risk? Is it about protecting the reputation? So, for example, where I was at last at Ramsey, one of the big things was reputational risk. And so we went down to level 10 of tracking of the supply chain of sort of tier 10 vendors around the world. So we could tell if there was, an issue of, recently there was a glove supplier in Malaysia, and there were court cases in the US about potential forced labor. We were able to inform our board of these events and the risks and the rest of it, not that they were a vendor of ours, but before it even hit the news. So it was that, but that was because they were seen of value. So we knew what the board wanted. We worked out, what the CFO and what the CEO wanted. So I think for me, the key thing comes back to always, what's the problem we're trying to solve for? And I really liked your bit, Rob, about get the basics right. So of course, you need to keep the lights on. You need to keep the vendors in contract and the rest of it.
Yeah.
You need to have the right relationships internally. But after that is just work out where the value is, and then have those discussions.
Yeah, I think that I totally agree with that. The other thing we don't do well as procurement is do procurement on procurement's behalf very well. And so if a stakeholder came to us and said, there's an opportunity for me to optimize, to deliver better outcomes, we would simply say, okay, well, let's take that to market. What is your requirements? We just got to do that for ourselves. So the procurement function needs to look at itself and say, what do we need? Well, we need to engage the market for tools, and we need to get capability. Then get into market. I mean, there's players there all the way from intake to pay that have solutions that you can put into your stack with limited disruption immediately. And what ends up happening is the organization says, well, we're on an ERP journey. We're gonna transition to something else. Our incumbent vendors have said to us that this is coming in their path, and so just wait for it to come. Guys, you're sitting there waiting, and the world is moving, and the world's moving fast. And so I would simply say to the procurement team members, look at yourself. Go to market, find out what products are out there that can solve your problems, and start implementing them, and push against that, influence that resistance that you'll get, because you will get it, like people will say.
I'd approach the question from a different angle, which is start with individual productivity. I did a transformation of a law firm last year with AI. One particular practice, we increased EBITDA by 40%. And a really simple example of how do you start with productivity, a partner in a law firm said, I use ChatGPT to write letters, but it doesn't sound like me, so I stopped using it. And I taught him how to create a project, put his favorite letters in there, point the next prompt to say, write this letter saying this, but make it sound like what's in this project. And even though it's a really simple hack, it went from him never using it to using it 5-6 times a day.
Yeah.
And why that's important is if your workforce are not using it on a daily basis, I personally get at least 3 days productivity a week out of using AI. I run a team of consultants. We openly say to the client, we will use AI. We'll record everything we do because we'll deliver a lot more value. We're not going to hide and pretend it's our work. But we all have our own Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini versions open in the room, and we're actively using it as a tool, just like we'd use desktop.
Can I ask, Rob, just while you're on that point, is there a noted variance between these language models in how they're utilized between Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT?
I think they all do different things. So anyone in PR marketing swear by Claude. Its quality of writing is so good.
Right.
Gemini is a great all-rounder tool, and it gives you the power of Google. ChatGPT is probably the first mover advantage. Copilot's mixed reviews, great if you're using it inside Microsoft, inside Word, or something like that.
Yeah.
But all these large language models very, very quickly will all become synonymous. They'll all be as good as each other.
Right.
And with every month, every 2 release, one does one thing a little bit better than the last.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It was just the other day I asked 3 tools which were the best tools to use. And it was actually quite interesting because they came up with the same list.
Right.
And they didn't necessarily come up, Claude didn't necessarily put Claude first. And it said for this, and this.
Yep.
And what was, I thought, even more interesting, it said, it's great that you're asking that question. Make sure you ask it every month, because this list will change.
Yeah.
But it was actually the correlation that I really liked between them.
And I connect them. So I just simply, exactly what you said, Rob, I go in and do certain elements in one, and I ask it to give me instructions to then go into the other one and then leverage that. So, ChatGPT will be really good at interacting with and building and forming content, but it doesn't create the content visually very well. So I just say, now give me the instructions that I can give to Claude. No problem. It lists them out. Then I can efficiently just take that across and I can use Claude to create the visual. And so sometimes it's not pick one, it's leverage them. And they will be very happy to instruct each other on how to do that.
And when we say, let's start with individual use, then it gets into team use of how we're sharing with each other nuggets that we're finding. So we have a 1 hour on a Friday where individuals present different ways they're using AI. And every week it blows my mind. But an example would be, so for this law firm, we created effectively something that procurement people have to do all the time is compare 2 sets of terms and conditions, right? 300-400 pages or 80 pages if it's not a government contract, and you're comparing the two. And we trained this model over a 2-month period to highlight, well, out of all the clauses, here are the ones that have real commercial impact. Here's the implication of accepting the other side's position. Here's a recommended response. And that we getting lawyers to use this tool, it was taking a 3-hour task and turning it into a 15-minute task. You still need the expert lawyer, but don't make the lawyer read the generic clauses that don't mean anything. And why I use that as an example, because once we created the tool, we shared it with the team and we invited anyone else to beat the model, come up with something better than this.
Right.
So it wasn't, we've done that, let's forget about it. Let's compete with each other to who can use the AI to get more output.
So the way I sort of look at it in procurement, and this is for listeners to sort of think about, one is productivity. Absolutely. How can I do it to free up more of my time? Then the second bit is, how can I get more information or better quality information than I could have done previously? So, it's bringing more knowledge in. And then the third bit, and this for me is the sweet spot for procurement, is judgment. And I believe combining that judgment with the information is going to be the sweet spot for driving the value. And so it's informed judgment, which is built with sort of being out on the road, meeting with suppliers, et cetera. So I actually think it's a very exciting time for people in procurement. The tools are going to be the enablers. And so you've just got to, again, live with that. You're going to have to accept it. But that judgment piece and the quality of the judgment and the speed of the judgment to do something that drives value for the organization, for me, will be the differentiator for who's got an amazing procurement career and who maybe stalls at more junior levels.
In terms of AI, do we think it's going to get to the point? Now, I've seen some demos in the last 2 years since I came out and set up SkillSoup of people showing me automated sourcing products. And they seem to do pretty well. I'd say they do better in commodity type tangible goods. They seem to be able to track CPI and commodity fluctuations and things like that. I'm not so confident its user case in more emotional categories that are harder to pin down in terms of should cost or open book or trying to get that sort of margin through the cost to serve. Say that we get agents that they do the reasoning, they can do the logic, they tie in with the automation and the large language models, etc. What is the job then of a commercial procurement category lead that they're very, very good, they're best practice, they're that top 10% of the market that they love visiting the supply, they love uncovering the nuance of the variations of the market, the supply chain. They've got great traction with the internal stakeholders. They're seen as genuine value-add business people.
Yeah, I love it. I love it because what we want from humans is judgment. That's not what AI can do. So that model that I talked about of the recommended terms and conditions response, very often the AI, the large language model, would come up and say, go back to them with this. And I'll go, yeah, that's actually a pretty unreasonable position in response to their unreasonable position. That's not my style. I'd rather say, actually, come on, let's be fair. This is the answer. Let's not waste your time and my time, get straight to that. So it's the judgment of me to respond to the prompt, because it's easier to respond to a draft version than a blank sheet. And that's what you're paying me for. And I think that same nuance is some of the like if I was going to evaluate a marketing agency or something, I'm bringing the right heads together. There's not an AI that can come in and say, this is the best answer, unless we actually want to test empirical data in the market where AI would be good.
Is there a danger that businesses won't value that judgment, like they don't value sometimes procurement enablement, or they don't value many things around the procurement suite, so they don't invest in it?
I think, sorry, Eugene. So I think that it's shifted. So if we talk about procurement and category management in its infancy and growth, it was all about my relevance to this organization is my ability to be an subject matter expert in the categories in which I'm operating. And that's the value I'll provide. That's, we've seen the shift. That's a category orientated procurement function. And we've been shifting to a stakeholder orientated procurement function. And I've always said that it would be better for the category teams to know more about their stakeholders and the strategy of the business and find the category expertise than be the category experts and know nothing or very limited about the business.
Category subject depth, would you say, is getting ever more redundant?
Correct. It's easy to replicate. Like there's some categories I have no professional experience in, but I could come back to you with some relevance on those categories relatively quickly based on using, large language models. Yes. So my, now there's still depth and 100% depth and judgment and all that are going to be key. But I would say that for procurement team members, if they're not orientating to the stakeholders and knowing that strategy and the business's direction, then they have a potential to become less relevant.
So more training in, like Rob was alluding to, in sales, engagement, being able to be tenacious internally to get traction without being annoying, find balance.
Sure.
But, every salesman tries to find the line.
It's not...
I was going to say, I think it's like anything in sales. It's, you build that relationship and you add value to the other side. For me, one of the things a category manager could do today is look at the pipeline of what's coming now. So innovation as an example. Yeah. So the number of stakeholders I talk to internally, and they're so busy doing their jobs, and they may be the best marketing person or the best surgeon or whoever it is, but they're still operating there. They're so busy in their day-to-day, they don't even know what necessarily the innovation or the disruptors, and you're talking about disruptors before. As a procurement person and with the access to this information, you can actually augment your knowledge base and provide a view on a pipeline of innovation. Or I tell you what, the discussion with a stakeholder that you have tomorrow is suddenly so much more informed because you're taking something of value to them. Now, whether that's what's going to drive the procurement relationship or not doesn't matter, but you've built that relationship piece. So I think there's a huge value piece there.
So I'll give you a couple of hacks that might be helpful. One, I think you're spot on, like, I would say use deep research or Claude's advanced research that will go away for 45 minutes and analyze something and give you a report back. And, as a partner at Kearney for 7 years, if a business analyst had have produced something like that in a week, I would have thought that was amazing work. And now I can get it for free in 45 minutes. And
scary.
If I wanted to do, sourcing electricians in Perth, I could run some deep research on the market and it would give me pretty granular data that most category managers traditionally struggled to get that detail.
Yep.
It's my ability to interpret that, look at the corporation's needs, look at the stakeholder I need to have a conversation with, and turn up informed. But I also really like, Chris, your point of where's the future going. So I was advising a medical supplies business on use of AI. I knew nothing about the industry. I did deep research on, literally prompt engineering. I spend up to an hour writing the prompt. So I am a tier 1 strategic management consultant advising this client with these constraints. This is the strategy of the organization, and I want them to solve this business problem. And for this situation, I said, research the most elite credible sites, look at Johns Hopkins University, look at MIT, look at Silicon Valley, and give me an answer of what the next 5 years looks like in terms of innovation. And I turned up with the whole C-suite there, and it just blew, like they were thinking about none of the things at the reason, because they're so busy just dealing with day to day. And so you can become an expert really quickly, and your skill is, how do I best use this information to serve my stakeholder?
How does cybersecurity come into this? We've touched on it a little bit. I think a lot of businesses want, especially the finance institutions, insurance, they want to leverage AI. They do see the value in it. They see what can be achieved. They have fragmented ideas of risk across the business, which cause internal probably angst. And then they've got lots of red tape so that they feel like they can't really take advantage of what's there, which might be quite frustrating, because we're probably in an arms race here of people, especially at the very top end of town, with the elites or the billionaires. They're probably seeing this as something where they're trying to basically use AI to create intelligence rather than something that is defining how to make rockets. They just want intelligence that can be leveraged across any plane. And that's probably filtering down into the corporates, because they are obviously seeing as well the people that conquer AI are going to create a competitive advantage and a barrier to entry where the risk, basically, that is their risk, because they're driven to be one to dominate. They're probably not so concerned with the risk of maybe what businesses smaller down the food chain would be thinking of. How does a CPO get traction in that environment to make this a reality?
I think you just got to work within the framework that you're given and not see them as barriers. Regulation makes sense. Most of the time it makes sense, and it's brought in place for real, considered risks. And so, if you talk about data residency and making sure that it's onshore, if you're talking about whether or not my information is going to become part of the, larger language models training, those are all real but solvable problems. And so the question is the person in the room that you're interacting with from your organization just stopping progress because they don't have an understanding of it. They're not engaged in it. They see it as a threat to their role. And so,
which one is more likely? Is it a threat to the role? Is everyone trying to protect their bit?
I think it's a bit of everything. But there is this push from the C-suite that says, "Get on with it, guys. Get on with it." And so, those people that are causing the sort of the roadblocks, they have to get out of the way, and they will. So, I think the regulation is right in the sense that it's trying to ensure that the business is not putting itself at risk. But if you wind back and look at our environment today, our ERP systems have data that can be accessible by those organizations across multiple tenants, whether you believe it or not. They've done an awesome job in saying that your data is secure, even though it sits in multiple servers around the world, and that we'll never have another customer or us accessing your data without the right authorities and the right reasons. And so we're all of a sudden in a world of AI where we say, I don't want my information being in that environment because I don't know where it's going to go. Sorry, guys, it's always been in an environment like that, and it's always been accessible. I guarantee you some of the major ERP...
the back end, they can get anything they want.
And so they've done a really good job in convincing us that they can't.
Yes.
The question is going to be, what are they going to do when the AI and large language models can and do and add value? All of a sudden, you might see some of our traditional ERP providers saying, we can give you benchmarking data. We can go across a state and we can find other information that you need, because that's the competitive advantage that we're seeing coming out of AI. Now, I'll rewind back. So regulation's right. Guys, it's already been in the cloud. It's SaaS solutions. It's somewhere. You're just convinced that this model is different to this model. So once we get over that, then we'll become more engaging in the use of AI and its ability to, put things into silos, to make sure that your data is protected, to make sure that you're not training your competitors to be really good at doing what you do. And then I think we'll get a lot less people in the corporations that will put roadblocks for us transitioning. So
what about cost? How expensive is an AI journey? Is that a silly question? Is that a real question? Businesses have invested heavily, if they're, some have, in putting in Oracle or SAP and all these ERP systems or Coupa. Where does AI fit into that? What is its cost base realistically going forward?
I would say the cost base is getting it wrong. And by that, you just got to make sure you're choosing the right suite of tools, however sophisticated, and what's the road path of those. You just got to look at some of the large software providers now, and their share prices sort of tanking because they're being disrupted. And you talk about, banks in Brazil, and then the disruptor there. So you really want an organization that's evolving as fast as the market. Otherwise, you're better off. And that's the cost. It's almost the cost of failure, because once you've invested and put in place a big platform and you've sunk in the sort of hundreds, millions of dollars, you're tied in a little bit. Whereas AI, again, if you come back to what you're trying to solve for, if you need an ERP system, then you probably do go to the big end of town. If you're looking for anecdotes of information, you do not need an ERP system, and you can go incredibly cheaply. So I think, it really is sort of horses for courses. But I did just want to circle back on the cybersecurity piece.
Yeah.
For me, I think they're heroes of cybersecurity teams, by the way, because all it takes is to be hacked, your personal information to be hacked, and your life stops. You hack an organization and you can literally make it go bankrupt. And so rather than being the fun police, I actually think, they're the guardian angels. So the question then is, how do you play with them? And if you want to put in place a system, most cybersecurity teams will say, okay, well, you need these 10 protocols, and, you connect them in with the provider. If you're doing it for yourself, I don't know, doing category management and the rest of it, slightly controversial, but you can do it outside of the walls of your organization if you're not putting in commercial information.
Correct.
And it's amazing how much category knowledge or innovation you can build without putting one piece of information that is in any way commercially sensitive to your organization. And so I'm just saying, you've got to be smart about it. Clearly, you cannot breach the confidentiality agreements that you have, but, do think about it a little bit horizontally. There's a lot of, you can get 99% of the value without quoting $1 figure from your organization.
Yeah. So data governance is critical. And I worked for consulting to a government client who, so a secretary wrote a letter to my client and said, write me a paper on why we shouldn't use AI. And I was like, really? Is that where we are? And when we talk about a strategic organization, procurement often puts a limit on itself with its own ambition. And what I mean by that is, are you a CPO who is the guardian of third-party spend, or do you have an owner's mindset and you're trying to solve the problems of the business? So understanding what the strategy of the business and what's important. And any business problem can be solved with third parties. If I want to increase sales, I can outsource Salesforce, I can have sales software, I can do all sorts of things. But it might not be the right answer, but I should, as the head of procurement, allow the business to make an informed decision between what can I buy from third parties compared to what we do ourselves. And when it comes to things like data governance, because I don't think it's a cybersecurity issue, I think it's how are we treating data appropriately and are we clear? The best organizations say, exactly, we're not using customer data, we're not using proprietary stuff, go for your life, any tools you want, we want you to learn, get up the curve. If it's the next level of sensitivity of saying, okay, well, our share price wouldn't tank if this was leaked, but would really rather it wasn't, then we have walled gardens and some protocols. If it is, well, like at Ramsay, we are now dealing with sensitive personal information, some of the most vulnerable people in society.
Yeah.
We want that data cleansed. We want, super, challenges over the top of it before we're going to use any AI on it. And having that clear from the top of the organization to the bottom of when am I allowed to use what data, and if I'm unsure, who do I ask? I think that's the massive unlock, rather than saying, if you as an organization say, well, we think it's too scary, so we're not going to do any of it, and your competitor does, you're suddenly backwards in the race.
I wanted to just say it's a great point you made too, but Chris, around, we go as procurement practitioners to conferences and we share best practices. We go to round tables and we talk about category strategies, not commercial terms, but things. So it's a great point that we're just really then taking that and using AI to do those same conversations and that same discussion about what is the right approach to the market for this certain category. And so, I think it's a great point. We're already doing that physically, and we can now take advantage of that within AI.
And the other component linked to that, Phil, is because we're bringing the outside in. So you go for your life, research the vendor, where are they at in their life cycle, or talk about supply risk or financial risks, etc. Again, the sort of the depth of questioning that can be had before you go into a negotiation, before you go into a meeting. Find out all there is about the people you're meeting. You can literally ask just a few generic prompts before you become sort of an expert at it. And you'll go into that meeting knowing 20 times more than the other party.
Yeah, we used to just building that. So my challenge as a CPO has always been, I've got a team of people that have this fantastic knowledge and experience. The more senior you become, the more categories you've interacted with. And so we always try to find a way, how can I get the leadership team and the broader team to help contribute to a person that's doing a category piece of work? So we used to do things like, if you've got a sourcing plan and you're about to do an event, you need to come and talk to this group of people and to get some feedback. It wasn't about, anything other than, I did that category before. I found some great ideas. And what we used to find was at the end of the process where they'd come and present and say, here's what I did. And then all of a sudden, the people that had done it before and found better ways would say, well, did you try this? And you'd see the category manager going, wish you had told me that at the start of the process. And so it was always about, can I physically bring them together? Can I get the knowledge into that individual? Because in procurement, we're very siloed and the way that we go about our work is very siloed. And sometimes our leader doesn't even know what we're working on or have depth of understanding of what we're working on. And so I think that definitely, what has become a great tool to collectively bring all knowledge together and to make sure that that individual contributor gets the benefit of that. And I think that's a great point in how we approach category management and AI in the future.
And I think bringing back to your cost point is a good one. And under that, banner of finance is the language of business, right? So give you a classic example that many procurement people will face. You're purchasing a large bit of hardware that uses a lot of power. How much do you want to pay upfront, which is a large CapEx cost, versus the electricity cost of running that machine over the next 10 years? And do you understand what the priorities of the CFO are? If the business is listed and it's valued on EBITDA, I want to have as little OPEX as possible, and I don't mind a large CapEx bill because shareholders will say, reward me for investing in the assets of the business. Whereas what I often find is procurement people will raise the right question. Oh, well, we're looking at total cost of ownership and true value. Yeah, let's think about power. Let's think about the upfront cost. But there's no formula. And different people in the room will make a different decision every time. So using AI to model the options, linking it back to what has the CEO, CFO publicly said to the market, turning up to the C-suite meeting saying, well, based on our stated strategy for the year, we might be paying more CapEx up front, but it's going to mean your OPEX is, $500,000 lower year on year for the next 10 years. Right. What do you want? So it's not giving them the answer, it's helping them make informed decisions. And that's where AI can really help.
If we look then at more the skills and the future for procurement, and I've noted in the last year since I came back in the market at the front end, a lot of unemployment's rising across procurement. And I even took a couple of calls waiting for this podcast today where people are telling me that they're now being out of the workforce or in the companies, but they've pulled back on certain initiatives or they've, etc. And offshoring and outsourcing, I think, is back on the agenda for many businesses that are feeling the pinch of obviously strained consumer price index going, changing for the negative. And so if we assume most roles are 60% admin, 40% value creation, even running a business, a lot of my role was I would still say heavily administrational, and there's 40% that you do, or even 30 that maybe only you have the experience to maybe do, etc. What does that mean then for the future of procurement? Say there's 4,000 to 5,000 procurement professionals in the country that I would say are leaning towards strategic or, solid, not non-purchasing. What does that look like over the next 5 years? Does that go down 50%?
It doesn't have to. And the reason I say that is that if there's just been so much admin in the past and just keeping the wheels on is hard enough, then that area is really vulnerable to outsourcing, to AI, to all of that. But what is all the value that we've never done, like total cost of ownership analysis, should cost modelling, strategic alignment to the organisation? So if you want to keep your job in procurement, focus on how you can leverage these tools to deliver that. Because if I'm the CEO or the CFO and you turn up and before I've had my spans and layers conversation of who I can get ready with, you're saying, you know what, if I had these tools, I could give you this value. It's too late if we're already running the spans and layers conversation. Doing it up front is like, all right, well, I don't want to get rid of that function because this person is really in tune on how we can, align our third-party spend with the market. So I'd say that's the opportunity, but the risk, you say, is very, very real.
Say I'm government, and government typically have the biggest procurement teams. Surely it's an incentive to use AI to literally cut those procurement teams straight out. Can they take 50% out of their workforce? And I'm just talking procurement, but can they take it out holistically? Is that the smart thing to do? Is that something that's going to happen? Or do you think that AI will be constrained?
I don't think it'll be constrained for keeping people's jobs. I think there's a government ethos that's coming through around productivity, and I think they can't avoid that. I don't think they're sprinting to the solution of we can do this with less people. So there's definitely more cautious in their approach, but they're definitely walking in that direction, and they have to. And so I think that they will be slower for the uptake. Some departments will be more innovative, and they will come more forward in their approaches. But yeah, I think in general, government will get there as well, even though there are potential impacts for their workforce.
Okay.
So I think if you're in procurement, I think there's some skills, and it doesn't matter that AI is here or not, but first of all, curiosity. So am I looking always at things and asking questions? Stakeholder influencing, we talked about it. Do I know how to engage with people internally, externally, with vendors and drive to outcomes and sort of that influencing bit? And I actually do believe we need to continue training in the basics of procurement. So we talked about, the different steps and all the rest of it, because sure, AI can provide you the answer and do all your PowerPoint graphs, etc. But it comes down to how you interpret it. And if you just rely on the knowledge that you're getting electronically to do that, you're missing a piece. If you've got that knowledge and then you can get all the smarts, and we talked about productivity and knowledge augmentation, and you apply your knowledge, I think for me that is the differentiator. So right. I think it is really for procurement folk to adapt. I mean, AI is just part of what you do. We were talking before the podcast about you need to know how to use a computer. If you don't use a computer, there probably aren't many procurement jobs that you can get today. AI is here to stay. But the skills of procurement, I think, are still going to be absolutely in need.
But probably still less. I think it's hard to get away.
Unless you can find more. So if you find more to do,
yes,
then of course that resource can be redeployed.
That is of genuine value.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that if I was the individual, that's where I'd focus. I think the lens, it's no different. That idea of what happened when desktop computers came in, or you may recall, like when emails came up, we said, we're all going to have more time to relax. Like that has not been the experience. And I think if you're not keeping up to date and hopefully a little advance, then your job will be, the classic saying is, AI won't take your job, but someone who uses it better than you may well do.
Would it be fair to say it depends on the maturity of your procurement department and how strategic it ultimately is as well? I think if we're talking a strong strategic procurement framework in a business that does value non-reactive based tendering, just contract renewal functions, following a 7-step methodology and a, basic spend cube and just whatever. That's probably more at risk than a procurement framework that is fully engaged with the business, has the relationship stickiness with the executives. That's, as you said, making judgment.
Yeah, but how many people do you need, right? If you've got loads of people doing category analysis today, you're probably not going to need them to do the same things. But their skills might be required, yet the nature of their job may change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, it's exactly the same. When I first started as a junior lawyer working in a law firm, I had my own secretary and the partner had 4. Now, one partner shares 4, one secretary has 4 partners that they're serving.
Can I ask, how did they justify 4?
Because literally there would be people dealing with typos and retyping contracts that WordPress processes just booted straight out. Right. Now, it doesn't now mean there's mass unemployment because where there were 4 jobs, there's now 1. It just means those people are applying different skills. And I think that's probably, we still need people to care for people in hospital. This really brought it home to me. I think this is the crux of how we should be thinking about the heavy lifting, because having Copilot on your desktop, it's like having Excel. Yeah, it's great, but what are you going to do with it? How does it help your business? And the way that, I did a project for a hospital, which was transcribing doctor's notes for nurses. And we got brought in. The nurses didn't invite us in. Union-dominated workforce. We said, great. We went to the union. Give us your nurse. They gave some very gruff, conservative, long-standing nurses who said, robots making decisions over my patients will never happen. And we said, okay, good, fine. We co-created this thing. It was almost like a spell checker in Word. It highlighted in yellow, here is where a treatment decision is being made. Tick yes or no. Highlight in red where there's something in the patient's history or something in the level of risk of this decision that means go back to the doctor or get a second opinion. After 3 months, the outcome was nurses were taking, used to be an average of 6 hours. They were taking under 3 hours a week to do this task. They could spend more time with patients, which is what they wanted to do, and they were getting better outcomes for their patients. And they said, we're never going back again. But the key aha moment for me was 80% of the cost and the work was redesigning the process, co-creating it with the actual users so it met their needs and they were comfortable. 20% was the tech enablement. Wouldn't happen without the tech, but it's how are you using it in your workforce that is the value unlock, not the fact that you've got an icon on your desktop.
And would you translate that, Rob, to say from a procurement professional, I haven't got time to go into the market. I haven't got time to sit with my stakeholders. So that would be the use of maybe a procurement professional equivalent of the nurse. And so, we used to mandate that our team members had to spend at least 2 days in the business. And so and we used to record it and measure it. And we used to say, we actually want you to go out and deliver things. We want you to actually go out and take things off the conveyor belt. We want you to actually participate in the business, because that knowledge will then play back in the capability of doing your job. And I think that's a great example around the nurses, Rob, but as procurement professionals, you got to get out into the business, experience it, or make you better at your job. Even if you think it's not relative, it is,
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is turning procurement from being a reactive function to a proactive solutions-driven function. And I think it has been the victim of having a knock on the door and saying, we need you. And then procurement gets up and goes, right, what do you want? It really should be knocking on the door and saying, we have a solution for you. Can I spend 20 minutes of your time? Because I think I've got something you're interested in hearing about that can add value.
So I used to say to my team, 30% of what procurement does should be us proactively taking ideas to the business. Now, if you're underwater just doing your day job, you don't have 30%. So we used to run a bit, that TV show Shark Tank, where people pitch ideas.
Yeah.
Once a year, we would bundle procurement teams with business people to come up with ideas of how we could use third parties
Great
to
idea.
innovate and improve and meet the objectives of the strategy. Doing stuff like that, you don't want to cut that if you're the CEO. You're like, wow, you're injecting new ideas for us to do stuff better. A bit like your supplier days, Chris, and maybe you want to talk about that, because I think that's a fantastic initiative, that having the time to do that most procurement teams don't have time to do.
Yeah, what Rob's referring to was at a large bottler in this country, Coke bottler. It was running days with suppliers, and it was by category. And there were the challenges from the business that we got from the stakeholders, were the sort of top 5 things in packaging and beverage packaging that you want to solve for. And Gotin actually presented it to vendors all together. So everybody got exactly the same brief and sort of Q&A. And then they got the opportunity to come back and to sort of sit with the most senior people or whoever they sort of wanted to, and to pitch back their idea. And again, this is where, now this was sort of pre-AI, but there's all sorts of ways you could enhance it, make it more efficient, capture it, get more ideas. One of them is I was going to circle back on, Rob, and I was intrigued by what you were saying, the nurse system and the rest of it. I think one skill which is completely underplayed is that of change management.
Yeah.
And procurement can quite often say, well, I've come up, I've got the new vendor, we've got this new solution, we've made it ourselves. But the internal stakeholders don't buy into it. The speed of adoption is low. And the question then is, well, whose responsibility is that? And I've certainly got to say, I think it's procurement's. If you brought in someone new, embed it. Change management is a skill and an art in itself. And I think if we want to invest some skill, and again, that's not going to be taken over by AI. That is literally understanding what your stakeholders want. It's translating it into them, use cases and the rest of it. So I think there's a whole heap of amazing skills for people to get up to speed on that are going to be directly relevant.
And the softer side of it, really, more than the hard skills. But there could be
the influencing.
Yeah, influencing. Yes. And softer skills with a higher level of intelligence and engagement and really more thought-provoking for those stakeholders. So it's not, the soft skills of, can you say hi to them because you know them personally? No, the soft skills are with a higher level of
Does that mean we need to come in the office more for those soft skills to be truly exploited? Are those skills that transition in a way from the harder, we can automate quite a lot now. We can do it in 15 minutes. Used to take a week. It's now done in 45. That productivity increase. But if you're then going to be relied upon more to be a true engager of the business, a business partner, how do we do that in an environment now where you may be working from home entirely, and I know that's a topic that people are probably listening.
Yeah.
Shh, stop it. I like my lifestyle.
Yeah. I think blended.
How does that transition?
It's got to stay blended, because if I think about my own work that I do now, I could not be in an open office environment where people are talking and disrupting my thought process of my interactions and just going sometimes down the rabbit hole of asking questions, getting responses, asking more questions, getting responses. But the relationships are very important. And there's efficiencies in, people hate says there's efficiencies in being in the office. I mean, you can see somebody walking past and get an answer on or get a decision that you needed instantly and move to the next stage, where if you had to ask them, send them an email or ask them for a formal meeting, you'd be in the calendar in 3 or 4 weeks' time. So there is some efficiency gains in being in the office and interacting with people as well. It's not about sociability and engagement.
Does that balance swing though? Whereas I think now the ideal is at least maybe 2 days in the office, 3 days at home, I'd say is the more norm right now.
Yeah.
Does that swing?
Well, for me, we're going down a whole nother topic now, but
I know.
If I think about the way that I do my work today and the office environment that's best for me to be functioning, productive and everything else, I almost want us to revert back to what we would call the old days of people have their own office.
Right.
If the work environment was I would walk in, I could shut my door, I could focus and concentrate. I could see someone walking past. I could go, hey, just want to check with you really quick. We want to do this, this, and this. Does that sound right? I think almost if you did that, I know there's equivalent. People put the headphones on, things like that. But for me, you would get me more in the office if I could find focus time and not be disrupted, because I think that's a key for me. But also seeing and interacting with people is an important part of the role.
And I run a consultancy where clients pay a lot of money. I think there's value on being in person as much as possible. I completely agree that Phil, there are times when I just need a breakout room to get this bit of work done. But at the same time, if that research element is taking less and I've got the answers at my fingertip, I do want to invest that in face-to-face time with my clients, understanding their business.
Yeah, one of the things I observe, people don't seem to like phone calls anymore.
Yeah.
And even sort of setting up a Teams thing can be daunting to a number of people. You can solve a huge amount of stuff bumping into someone, or you see them going to the coffee machine and you say, oh, I'm just going to the coffee machine as well at that point in time. And so I really don't underestimate the value that comes from it, and it can be hugely productive, but you've actually almost got to structure your productivity for it to be informal. I mean, it sounds a little bit, but I think if you want to learn on the job, I do struggle when people say, oh, I'm going to learn on the job, and then they're sitting at home behind a computer. I'm like, if you're a salesperson, telesales, that might work. But if you're in procurement, I'm going to come back to influencing judgments. You've got to be meeting people.
And it could be part of your retention strategy in this ever-changing world. The more relevant you are, the more you're seen, the more you have real relationships, not maybe virtual ones, the more you will be seen as an asset to be retained potentially.
And it's also creating events. I mean, so rather than saying let's be in the office today, is let's have a one-day strategy session. We're going to have it at that supplier in their offices, and half a day will be with them understanding. So you can, again, it doesn't have to sort of be binary, are you in the office or not? It's more, can you get groups of individuals together to exchange ideas?
And that's where the old model for me didn't work. The hot desking and everything, just it doesn't, it's not relevant anymore. So we go into the office with the intent to interact and engage with each other as a team. Yet we're finding desks as we arrive. We don't even have neighborhoods anymore. And I'm sitting amongst irrelevant people. So, there's a lot of that sort of, so I almost feel like we need to revert back to give them. There's something said about, having your family photo on your desk. There's something said about not having to pack up everything and put it in a locker when you leave for the day. And that's another reason why the work environment before we started working from home made sense. Let's leverage, let's use these resources better by not having desks empty because that person's not there today. But I don't think that's not the return to work strategy. The old world doesn't match the new world for me. So there just needs to be a little bit more. It's a different topic, but procurement team members want to come in. They want to sit amongst other procurement team members. They want to learn from each other. They want to engage with each other. And the work environments that we're bringing them back into post-COVID don't give them that. So they end up doing Teams events and other things. They end up doing virtual VCs with other people that are in other areas, and they just go, why am I here? And they sort of lose that.
And Phil, I like that idea, like you raised before, sitting with the business. Right? If you're buying a category that is relevant to a business, like I want you to be curious about who they are, what keeps them. And the water cooler conversations are interesting because it's not only, hey, that was much more efficient because I grabbed you walking by. It's oh, I'm working on this problem. And well, I can probably solve that for you. It's the generative, unscripted meetings with no agenda that happen in the office that will never happen in a Teams meeting.
Correct.
Summarize it. Has everyone got a final statement they want to put on AI and procurement as we wrap up podcast 1?
Look, I'm happy to. So for me, AI is an enabler. And the procurement value for individuals will be in the judgments they make. And from a sort of career perspective, unless you believe every organization, private and public, is incredibly well run with no opportunities and no risks in the supply base, then there's still plenty of growth and upside for people who choose to invest in the right skills.
Phil?
I think just I'm almost going to say the same thing, but be curious. Don't wait for the organization to come to you and say, okay, now we've got you a new capability that you should interact with. Take it upon yourself, like you should for all your career and learning and capability uplift, is be curious and get into it. Start adding value before they make space for you to do different things. Definitely be proactive in your approach to this transition, because it's a transition that's going to happen. So you want to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's going to. And Rob?
Well, I think building on that is don't wait or put the control in the hands of your employer to whether or not you're up to speed with these tools or not. AI takes time on the tools. Watch the YouTube videos, learn your favorite LLMs, find ways to get personal productivity and share it with your colleagues, and great things will happen. If you say, oh, because they haven't given us the training, I'm not doing it, no excuse.
Thanks for listening, everyone, at Supply Chain Unfiltered.